Modern humans came from Homo sapiens, and while many of us carry a bit of Neanderthal DNA, there's more to our story. Imagine finding a young girl whose parents belong to two entirely different human groups, one part Neanderthal and the other from a recently discovered lineage. This finding completely shifts how we think about human origins. Before we jump in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you won't miss any fresh updates. People now know that being partly Neanderthal isn't just a myth. Neanderthals were a branch of humans that vanished around 40,000 years ago. Today, only about 2% of Eurasian people have Neanderthal genes, yet ancient human history shows there were several groups. Some new finds even point to a third human group that might have mixed into our ancestry. But how could this happen, and what became of these groups? One professor even revealed a 3D head model of an ancient human from the Denisovan group, discovered in southern Siberia, Russia. There's a cave near the Alai Mountains called the Denisova Cave, named after an 18th century hermit who once lived there. Back in 2008, archaeologists from the Russian Academy of Sciences uncovered several bone fragments there. They dated the oldest bones to at least 51,000 years old, and soon realized these remains weren't from a Neanderthal or modern human. Researchers at the Max Planck Institute declared it a new human species, the Denisovans. Despite their advanced DNA tests, we still know little about them. Evidence suggests they existed as early as 217,000 years ago, but only a handful of bone fragments have been found so far. It wasn't long before another discovery turned everything on its head. This wasn't just about the Denisovans. The find turned out to be a mix of two human groups. This young individual wasn't pure Denisovan at all, but a hybrid born from interbreeding between two distinct human species. That challenges what we once thought about how different human groups mated. Think about it. Why do Neanderthals and Homo sapiens successfully mix, while mules, offspring of a horse and a donkey, are sterile? The answer lies in chromosomes. A horse has 64, a donkey 62, so their mule ends up with 63, an odd number that messes up its genetic pairing. Even though mules can't reproduce, other animal hybrids like ligers, the mix of a lion and a tiger, can be fertile. Many primates also share enough genetic similarity to produce fertile offspring, which is why Neanderthals and modern humans could mix. Researchers had long predicted that Denisovans might have interbred with other human groups, regardless of whether their offspring could reproduce. However, no one had confirmed this until 2018. In 2012, Russian archaeologists went back to the Denisova cave and found more bone fragments, around 2,000 of them, but couldn't identify most of the pieces. These bones were stored away for years until, in 2016, a student at the University of Oxford made a surprising discovery. Emily Carter, an MSc student, was testing the DNA on these fragments to determine what animal they came from. To her shock, one tiny bone, just 2 centimeters long, turned out to be human. Given the cave's history of human remains, she took a closer look. What Emily found was astonishing. She initially thought she'd made an error. That small bone was actually the result of interbreeding between two human species. The individual was part Neanderthal and part Denisovan. If her results were correct, this would be the first evidence of a first-generation hybrid between two human species. Emily immediately alerted her department head, and soon the fragments were sent off to the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig, Germany. At the Maxwell Institute, experts had the tools to analyze the bone in detail and confirm Emily's findings. Dr. Aaron Miller, the head of genetics, explained that Emily wasn't the only one who was stunned. A team of paleogeneticists, including Vivian Ross and Dr. Aaron Miller himself, conducted a full genome analysis. They isolated each DNA segment to see which parent it matched, and to their amazement, both confirmed that Emily's discovery was correct. The bone was indeed the very first hybrid between a Denisovan and a Neanderthal. Dr. Aaron Miller later admitted that finding a first-generation inbred human was extremely unlikely. Scientists had expected Denisovans to have occasional children with other ancient humans, but they never thought it would be proven so quickly. Previous studies had already shown that Neanderthals and Denisovans sometimes had kids together, but actually finding the remains of one such offspring was beyond what anyone imagined. Still, this DNA test was just scratching the surface. So, who was this ancient human, and how did these two distinct species come to mate? A replica of a Neanderthal woman sits on display at the National Archaeological Museum in Madrid. When Dr. Aaron Miller and his team examined the bone further, they learned it belonged to a girl. Based on the width of her bones, they estimated she was about 13 years old when she died. Radiocarbon dating suggested she passed away roughly 990,000 years ago. The tiny finger bone that Emily first analyzed turned out to be a crucial clue, and the team named her Riley after the cave where she was found. To figure out Riley's parentage, researchers separated the DNA sequences. They discovered that her mitochondrial DNA, which comes solely from the mother, was Neanderthal. That meant her mother was a Neanderthal, while her father was a Denisovan. An interesting part of her genome is that it offers insights into both groups, the Neanderthals from her mom's side and the Denisovans from her dad's side, as explained by geneticist Dr. Fabio Mason. The next mystery was how these two groups came together. Even with all these findings, the research team needed more confirmation. "I thought we must have made an error," recalled Dr. Aaron Miller. For a third test, they sent the bones to the Francis Crick Institute in London. There, population geneticist Dr. Marcus Lee reviewed the data and confidently stated that the results were spot on. Dr. Marcus Lee was firm. There was no doubt about the discovery. But why was it so surprising? Well, a model of a Neanderthal woman from the nearby city and cave was already on display in a museum. The fact that Riley turned out to be a first-generation hybrid, meaning her parents were fully Neanderthal and fully Denisovan, was something entirely unexpected. Even finding a first-generation Neanderthal, Homo sapien mix had eluded scientists until now. Dr. Marcus Lee later commented that discovering a first-generation person with mixed ancestry from these groups was extraordinary, a mix of solid science and a bit of luck that's bound to end up in textbooks soon. So, how did her parents meet? One theory suggests that Riley's parents may have crossed paths in the cave itself. While most Neanderthals roamed across Eurasia and Denisovans were more common in Siberia, the Alai Mountains, where the cave is located, lie between these regions. I doubt any Neanderthal living west of the Urals would ever run into a Denisovan, said Dr. Alec Johnson, who believes that if these two species live closer than we thought, it might even mean modern humans have traces of Denisovan DNA. Riley's discovery hints that interbreeding might have been much more common than researchers once believed. Until 2018, scientists had studied only 23 ancient human samples, and only 2 showed signs of interbreeding, leading them to think it was a rare occurrence. But perhaps they were mistaken. Neanderthals and Denisovans might have had fewer opportunities to meet, yet when they did, they mated quite often, more frequently than we assumed, according to Dr. Alec Johnson in an interview with a popular news outlet. Riley's find spurred scientists to take another look at other ancient human remains. One example is a lower jaw known as OAS1, dating back 42,000 years. At first, OAS1 seemed like a typical modern human, but closer inspection revealed a small amount of Neanderthal DNA. How could that be? It's likely that the Neanderthal ancestor of OAS1 lived only 4 to 6 generations back. If interbreeding were truly a rare event, such cases would be extremely limited. Yet both OAS1 and Riley provide evidence that these encounters happened more than we thought. An 1885 painting even shows ancient humans fleeing from a mammoth, hinting at the chaotic life back then. Paleoanthropologist Chris Stringer pointed out that mixes between Neanderthals and Denisovans could have had survival benefits. Humans with a diverse genetic background tended to do better, explained Catherine Hudson from the University of Tübingen in Germany. She added that as long as groups stuck together, their kids had a higher chance of survival because early human bands were small and vulnerable, and frequent migrations meant they often met other groups, perhaps how Riley came to be. Interbreeding might also offer clues about why the Denisovans eventually vanished. Dr. Alec Johnson suggests that instead of being wiped out violently, Denisovans might have gradually merged into modern human groups. Every time a Denisovan mated with someone from another group, their distinct genes diluted over time, leading to their eventual disappearance. But if that's true, modern humans might partly descend from Denisovans. However, this idea still hasn't been proven. If Denisovans and Neanderthals mated frequently, why did they remain separate for so long? Dr. Catherine Hudson has one idea. Maybe the offspring of Denisovan-Neanderthal unions were infertile. That could explain why Denisovan genes faded while the Neanderthal Homo sapien hybrid survived. Unfortunately, we can't be sure whether Riley was fertile or not, or how exactly the Denisovan DNA faded away. Riley raises more questions than she answers, but she definitely brings us a step closer to understanding human evolution. In a 1975 film called The Land That Time Forgot, two cavemen are seen fighting, hinting at the wildlife of ancient humans. While it's possible that Denisovans blended into other human groups over time, Jacob Adams from Princeton University offered another idea. He suggested that Riley's discovery doesn't rule out a mix of other factors, like competition. In 2020, European researchers confirmed that competition for food, mates, or territory can drive a species to extinction if they lose out. So did Homo sapiens or Neanderthals outcompete the Denisovans? A diagram showing several ancient human species helps explain that early on, scientists thought modern humans evolved from a mysterious hominid that later mixed with Neanderthals. Now, Riley's story indicates that the creation of modern humans was far more complex. Recent reports in evolutionary biology suggest that mixing between very different lineages isn't the exception. It's actually quite common in human evolution. In other words, modern humans are the product of several different species mating over time. Keep following along to learn about a fourth human species that was recently uncovered. Museum visitors still check out a model of a Neanderthal man, and reports on Riley's DNA came out in 2018. Then, in January 2019, another discovery emerged. Researchers announced that several human species had inhabited the Denisova cave in Siberia over thousands of years. They couldn't tell if Neanderthals or Denisovans lived there permanently or just visited, but future digs might reveal even more about our ancestors. A prehistoric figure was even built from bones discovered back in 1920. Then in February 2019, yet another find challenged what we thought we knew about human evolution. Scientists from the Center for Genomic Regulation used artificial intelligence to analyze the human genome and identified a fourth human ancestor, a mysterious figure whose identity still puzzles researchers. This unknown ancestor might have added to our modern DNA alongside Neanderthals and Denisovans. Even though Riley's discovery has answered many questions, it's left us with plenty more about how we came to be. Riley's find also brings up the possibility that modern humans might be partly descended from Denisovans, although no clear Denisovan, Homo sapien hybrid has been found yet. Even if one were discovered, it still wouldn't confirm whether these hybrids could reproduce. Future studies might reveal traces of Denisovan DNA in people alive today, suggesting that many of us could carry a bit of that ancient blood, but we may never know for sure.